What's up guys, Spice here. Welcome to the main Noctis tutorial where we're going to show you how to play Noctis in Tekken 7. He's the new guest character for the game, and I gotta say they did a really great job importing all the assets from Final Fantasy 15. I mean, the game just looks so really close to it. I wonder how the Tekken 7 engine was able to handle it. I mean, even like we've got the new stage here, Hammerhead, and it's really looking great, especially with the lighting and everything. I mean, we got even Ignis and Prompto and Gladiolus walking around here. Like, man, it feels like I'm playing a completely different game. Well, anyways, we're gonna get right into it. So we're gonna talk about his warps. Wait, but what do you mean this isn't the game? But this is Tekken 7. Oh, wait, what? But this is the stage. This is the new stage. But oh, well, that's disappointing. Okay, fine. Well, then I guess we'll just have to play Tekken 7 then. Whoops. I wanted to play Final Fantasy 15, but I guess I'll have to settle for that game. Right, and welcome to the main Noctis tutorial on my channel. Now we got that thing out of the way. Now that I found the right game, we're gonna actually get into how to play Noctis Lucis Caelum in Tekken 7. So if you've been sleeping under a rock when it comes to Tekken, you probably don't know what's up with this, because, I mean, how could you miss this? This is probably one of the craziest things that has ever happened to Tekken since, actually, I guess Akuma was probably the last craziest thing. Comparatively. Actually, I think this is crazier than Akuma, but I guess, I don't know, Akuma's pretty crazy. Anyways, so Noctis Lucis Caelum is the latest DLC character to come to Tekken 7. He is the guest character from the Final Fantasy series, which is notable because it is not a fighting game series, which is really weird when it comes to guest characters in games, is that if it's a fighting game, the guest character, usually they're from another fighting game. But in this case, he's from an RPG, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Also around this time that I'm recording this, Geralt just got announced for Witcher 3. Well, not just, but like maybe a week ago. So I guess it's not too uncommon. Namco's kind of branching out now. But anyways, so he is definitely probably one of the most surprising additions to a fighting game that I've ever seen, considering what kind of person he is and the type of game that he's fitting into. Because Geralt and Soul Calibur kind of makes sense because they're both medieval-based sword-fighting characters, while Tekken is supposed to be a sort of realistic martial arts-based fighting game. You have Noctis, who is pretty much just like an anime hero. I mean, the things that he does, the things that he can do, are pretty out there in terms of what's possible by just martial arts alone. But anyway, so we're gonna get into this. So let's talk about Noctis first. My relationship with the character is that ever since I saw him, I became interested in him, and the more that I saw more and more of his character, I kind of got more and more interested in how he plays. And eventually, when he came out, it reached the point where I was seriously thinking about picking him up as a tournament viable character. It's weird to say that I main him, but I do main him as a character for real. He is not my preferred choice in most matchups compared to Leo. I still prefer Leo overall, but there are a few matchups where I do prefer Noctis in. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, probably, as part of this tutorial. And So I've been playing him for about 2 weeks straight now. The reason I did not make a tutorial right away because even though he was a new character and came out 2 weeks ago, I didn't want to make a tutorial based on the idea that he just came out, because I wasn't confident that I had been playing the character enough to understand what he's capable of just the first days or so. And even after a week, I wasn't confident that I knew everything there is to know about him, and I still don't. But I'm confident now that I can say that I do have a pretty good idea of what his neutral and what his flow is like, and the sort of good moves and the disadvantages and the advantages, the pros and cons, such and so forth. So that's why I waited such a long time, and I've been playing him pretty much non-stop. It's got to the point where I'm actually kind of rusty with Leo with how much I've been playing Noctis. But the good result is that now I feel very comfortable playing Noctis in tournaments. So with that being said, let's get on to it. So lore-wise, let's talk about Noctis' lore. So Noctis is not from Tekken, obviously. He is from a different universe. He is from the universe of Final Fantasy XV. If you have somehow never ever heard of Final Fantasy, it is the staple JRPG, Japanese RPG of that. It is the staple game example of that genre. Final Fantasy is the most stereotyped game series that when people think of when they think of JRPGs. It's a highly successful series. It's the flagship series of Square Enix, which formerly is Squaresoft, and Final Fantasy XV is the 15th and latest main installment in the Final Fantasy series. Now, if you don't know, if you've never played a Final Fantasy game, the games are not really sequels to each other. They are just separate stories which share some similar themes, some similar characters, and some similar monsters, and a lot of similar concepts, but the stories are different and the characters are usually different. Even though some characters have the same names, they're usually different characters. Noctis' version, the 15th game, he comes from a world I don't remember the name of. He is the crown prince of the kingdom of Lucis, which is the only sovereign country in the world that he lives in that is not controlled by the empire of Niflheim. And Niflheim has been at war with the kingdom of Noctis for a long time. I mean, kingdom of Lucis for a long time. And the only thing keeping the kingdom of Lucis from losing the war is the crystal that protects the capital city from being attacked at all. However, spoilers for the first 30 minutes of Final Fantasy XV, or for first hour, I guess. Noctis leaves his home country to go and marry Princess Lunafreya, who is a princess from a neighboring country that was occupied by the Empire of Niflheim. And when they're gonna get married, they're gonna sign a peace treaty which will end the war between Lucis and Niflheim. However, the peace treaty / marriage is a ploy, and that Niflheim uses the lowered defenses because of the marriage to infiltrate the kingdom of Lucis, which is the capital city, I believe is Solitude or Somnus or something like really like obscure name. I forget what it's called. Something about like shadows or something. Anyways, they invade the capital city and they kill Noctis' father, the king, and they take the power of the crystal, as well as they take the ring, I believe. I think something special about a ring. And Noctis is, while he's out of the country trying to marry his betrothed, he finds out that his father's been killed and the kingdom has been defeated, and he's on his journey to, avenge his kingdom, his father, and, take back the crystal from the Empire of Niflheim. And if you want to find out the rest of that story, you go play Final Fantasy XV. It's a pretty decent game, even though I think the pacing sucks ass. But maybe the DLC patches fix that. I don't know. Anyways, so Noctis' main power is that while he is a pretty boy shonen, he's not actually that emo, despite the looks. His main power is that as a member of the Lucis bloodline, he has the ability to summon weapons out of his hands. So he has spears, he has a great sword, he has daggers, and he has a regular sword. He has magic too. His throws are all magic based. He's actually missing. Oh, he has a shield too. I forgot. He's missing some other weapons. Like he used to have. He has like an engine blade. I mean, like a big engine gun. He has guns. But I think those are the main weapons, anyways, that you use in the game, anyways. His main power-up, actually... Oh, he has the axe, which only he brings out when he does his Rage Art. But his main trait that he doesn't have in this game is that he's able to summon all the weapons at once, which is like his limit break, his ultimate power-up, but you don't really see it. His main unique ability is the Warp Strike, which is where he goes across the whole screen, and in Final Fantasy XV he could do this too, where he can attack an enemy from really far away. He's the only one that can do that amongst his party. Which is the 3 guys in the back by the car, Regalia. Anyways, so enough about Noctis' lore. If you want to find out more about him and, just play Final Fantasy 15 or watch a playthrough or something. We're going to talk about the Tekken part of it. So let's get about the playstyle. So Noctis he's an interesting character because I think out of all of the new, like, weird characters in Tekken, like your Eliza, your Akuma, and your Geese, he is probably the most normal because he does not have a meter bar and he does not have, awkward, like, non-generic attacks per se. He has a classic down forward one, he has classic jabs, he has some generic low pokes, he has a decent sidestep, he has a okay backdash. It's probably one of his weakest traits, but I'll get to that later. He's not as, like, so gimmicky as Akuma or Eliza or even Geese are, even though Geese is pretty not as gimmicky, but they all have their own, like, focused traits that they're unique to them. Noctis has that too, but he is less like pronounced. Like, he is not as weird as they are. So what you get is Noctis's main strength is that he is an extremely long range with Punisher type of character that is good at keep out and he is good at decent rushdown. So that means he excels in departments where an opponent makes a mistake. Noctis is very, very good at capitalizing upon an opponent's mistake because of his long range with Punishers. He has the longest range in the game in terms of his general attacks by far, but he does have a weird lacking of some mid-range moves, and his fast attacks tend to be a little bit slower. So a lot of Noctis' best attacks are actually kind of slow, but they do have tremendous, tremendous range, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. So what you get, like I said, is a pretty well-rounded character who is pretty normal Tekken, to quote Jimmy J. Tran, who has a caveat of being extremely strong at whiff punishment. But he is not really the best in terms of all departments in the game. Whiff punishment is his strongest attribute, as well as range, as well as just a range game in general. His combo damage is also pretty good. But to list this into a quick pros and cons, let's talk about Noctis. He has a good poke game. His poke game is pretty decent. His down for one is above average, I'd say. It's pretty good. His jabs are not as, like, he doesn't really have a decent jab mix-up. And his jab mix, his jabs in general don't really have the best range. It has very, like, weak hitbox. But to compensate, his forward dash is actually one of the farthest going in the game. He goes very, very forward with his forward dash. In the opposite terms, his backdash is actually very short. So his backdash is one of the weaker ones in the game. It's not as bad as Gigas or Eliza, but it is not that great. So actually Noctis has a problem with pressure game because it is difficult for him to actually escape pressure via backdashing because his backdash distance is very short. But on the plus side of things, his range, of course, is great. His whiff punishment is among the best in the game. His combo damage is actually pretty good. He can hit 65 no problem, and he can even hit around 67 mid-screen if you try for a harder combo, and possibly even 68. So Noctis does hurt quite a bit in his combos. His combos, actually, execution-wise, he's not that hard. His harder combos do take a little bit of work, but his very basic, just decent damage combos are not that difficult at all. It's always pretty easy to pick up. His move list in general is also very short. He only has 73 moves. So he really is a very simple character compared to the rest of the cast. And he is not really a character with a lot of things to need to memorize about. So he's a very simple kind of character. His lows, however, are not the best. They are decent at best. He doesn't really have a low that is really, like, super cheap. He does have two very strong lows, full crouch down forward 2 and down back 2, but they are not the best. They are just, like B plus grade kind of lows, and they're pretty good, but they're not, like, crazy cheap, like, let's say, a Hell Sweep. He also has an Emo Man, which is the Demo Man, but, like, not as, demo, but more emo. So that's pretty good too, but it's weaker in its own sense, but better in its own sense as well. Noctis, because of his lows, are not the best. He actually has a tough time opening opponents up sometimes. But to make up for that, his punishment game is really good in terms of whiff punishment, of course, but also his block punishment is not too bad either. His 1-2-2 does give him 27, which is pretty good for a 10-frame Punisher. He has Punishers at 10, 13, 14, and 15. His down forward 2 is the farthest reaching 15 frame launcher in the game. It reaches even push block, a mid-range death fist, and max range demo man non-clean hit. So he is very, very adept at punishing moves that are very unsafe with a lot of pushback. He has decent mix-ups and moves that are safe, which are good pokes as well, such as sidestep 2, down forward 4-2, down forward 1, forward 1+2. His whole moves are in general actually really strong. And he does have a pretty decent full crouch mix-up as well. He has a hop kick, a 4-3. He has a lot of generic moves that are move types that are other from characters. Like, he has a move that is similar to an orbital heal. He has a hop kick. He has a counter hit launcher. He has a slide mix-up. He has a full crouch mix-up. He has a bunch of long-range whiff punishers. He has some wall splat moves. He has a 1+2 throw. He has pretty good Oki as well. He has a lot of ground hitting moves. His Okazemi is actually pretty good. I think it's one of his strong suits. And his wall carry is actually really, really great. But one of the downsides about Noctis is, one of the many downsides about Noctis you find is that his tracking is pretty poor, especially to sidestep right. It's preferred to sidestep right, I think, sidestep left for me, personally, but really any side is both very good for Noctis. Stepping in general is just very strong against Noctis. He is a pretty unsafe when you have to commit to things. Like, he has to take risks to get big damage fast, otherwise he's playing very low reward unless he's launching you. So a lot of his strong hitting moves are very, very unsafe. He actually seems to be a big fan of the number -14 since he happens to have a lot of moves that are -14, like that move, this move as well as -14. He just seems to be like a big fan of -14 in general. So if you have a character with a -14 launcher like Xiao Yu, Law, or Lars, you can actually kind of mess up Noctis a lot if he goes for these -14 moves. So going over it again without repeating myself too much, because I know I am, he is great at whiff punishing, great range. He has a lot of generic tools, which is always great. He has good mix-ups, good pokes, really great wall carry and combo damage. He's executionally easy. His holding moves are great. His Okazemi is good. But his downside is that he's pretty unsafe if he has to take risks. His mid-range is not the best, I think. His range 0 is also pretty bad. A lot of his best moves are slower, and he has a problem alleviating pressure because his backdash is poor, and he doesn't really have that great panic options. He doesn't have a standing crouch jab. He doesn't really have a very, very fast high crushing move. He doesn't have like an auto sidestep move or anything like that. His hop kick is actually a 17 instead of 15, and so on and so forth. And his tracking, of course, is also pretty poor. But with that being said, let's move on past his playstyle and pros and cons, and let's talk about his punish. Actually, before we talk about that, I'd say that Noctis fits you if you like to play a character that excels at really capitalizing on opponents' mistakes, because that seems to be Noctis' strongest suit. Also, he has tremendous range, so if you like playing a character with a lot of range and just like attacking opponents from really far away, Noctis probably fits you too. But you have to be able to play the close range game with Noctis as well, which is pretty important. I don't think he's like super good in this game. I think that Noctis is decent, like maybe mid-tier in my opinion. He has a good amount of weaknesses and a good amount of strength, so they kind of balance each other out, I think, in my opinion. So anyways, let's get on into the punishers. So, but I get rid of myself, but if you want to play Noctis, even though it's execution easy and he's simple, he does take a little bit of brain power to play him in a higher level, because it's easy to kill yourself with Noctis, basically. I'll get into that, though. Finally, punishers. So for punishers, you have 1, 2, 2, 10 frames standing, 27 damage, +1 on hit only, which is unfortunate because of how much damage it does. It only gives you +1. So after this, you don't really get your turn for free. You kind of have to contest stuff a little bit, but this kind of can make it easy to make an opponent make a mistake, because you can capitalize on the fact that the opponent knows that it's only +1, which makes your chances of pressing a button more likely. It is -17 on block, but the last hit does not jail, so you can get launched for it. The last hit, however, does track as well. For 12 frames actually, he has back 1-2, which is double high. The second hit is duckable, but this is also very, very delayable. It doesn't do anything special on the second hit counter hit. Negative 9 on block, and the second hit is +7, which is really great, but it does have a bit of pushback, so you can't really use it too well. Like, you can't just, like, because if they backdash, your down forward one's going to whiff, so you might need to use your longer range options in this scenario. It is also double high, so if an opponent is, like, you know, in a weird hurtbox position, like crouching or whatever, after a negative 12, then this is not going to work. 14 frames, he has back 3-1, which is knockdown, and you can back tech roll all that. If you do not back roll out of that, I believe you get guaranteed down back 1+2. And you might be able to get a launcher, but I doubt it. No, I didn't think so. You can back roll out of that, and it does wall splat. But this move itself is negative 14. It is high mid, so at the wall, it's not the best thing unless you get a first hit because it is starting high, so it's not really a mid-low mix-up for the wall. 15 frames, he has down forward 2, which is probably one of his best moves. I'll talk about it more later, but it is one of the farthest reaching, actually it is the farthest reaching 15 frame launcher in the game. It's super far range, you can use it quite a bit, you just have to be careful about using it because it is negative 20, so you have to be careful. 16 frames, for whatever reason, you can use forward 1+2. This move, I don't think has more range than down forward 2, I think it has less, surprisingly, or maybe just about the same, but this does less damage, and it's very, very unsafe, so you don't really have a reason to use this over down forward 2, except possibly at the wall, since that time it'll wall splat. 17 frames, he has up forward 3, which has not so great range, but it does leave a stronger combo. So you can do that. It has potentially go up to 70 damage over down forward 2 65 if you do the hard combo, so that can work in your benefit. 20 frames, he has, if something is very, very negative but incredibly far pushback, you can use Warp Strike forward 2. It starts up at 20 frames, and it pretty much goes about range, like 5 attack, maybe like about here, yeah, about range 5-ish. It's almost full screen, so that's pretty crazy. Think of it as a super fast Hadouken. I-25 and up, so they're very, very negative moves. He has down back 1+2, which is launch punch one block, but a lot of pushback. And he can get some pretty hefty damage out of that, pretty much minimum of 70 damage with down back 1+2. And more than that, he doesn't have a delayed hop kick because he has a floaty jump, so he can't really do anything with you know, delayed hop kick or delayed moves in general. So you mostly just use down back 1+2 as your strongest launcher. You can do charge down back 1+2, but you're never really gonna hit that most of the time. At least as a block puncher. So for 11 frames, he has wall standing 4, which is +5, and I believe it's about -6 on block. It does push out, and it doesn't really have that good of a hitbox, so it's kind of a whatever wall standing 4 because it pushes out so much. Tends to be a common theme among Noctis' moves that they tend to push them to range 1.5, which could be telling about how he's a character that wants to maintain his space. RA13, he has wall standing 1-2. This is hit confirm, but if you delay it too much, it is blockable. So the hit confirm window is there, but it's not too big or too small. Does 30 damage +2 on hit and at least some full crouch. This is just like 1-2-2, where it does a good amount of damage, but doesn't have heavy plus frames, so you can't really take your turn for free, but you can bait an opponent into attacking because it is only +2. And at least some full crouch too, so their options are more limited. I-14, he has wall standing 3-2. If you hold down after getting hit by wall standing 3, you will fall down and you will make the second part whiff. However, in that scenario, you will fall down and you can get picked up by down 2-2 for a launch. I'll talk about that more later when I talk about Noctis' full crouch mix-up game. The only one that I know that's going to be a block punisher for is probably Fang's Cortical Forward 1, which is the only -14 low that I can think of. I-15, he has wall standing 2-2, which is an auto screw, so you have to be a little bit careful about how you use this because of just how, just how, like, it might mess up things with the wall or distance or stuff like that. In the case that you block a sweep at point blank range, you would probably use wall standing 3, up forward 3 because it does more damage. And in the case that you block at like a launch punishable low at the wall, you probably want to do like a crouch cancel into fortresses 2 or something like that too, something that gets a more consistent wall splat. Since he does not have a wall splat move from full crouch, you might want to do something else. He does have up forward too, but sometimes that's a little bit slow because it starts up at 30 frames, so you know what I'm saying. So beyond that, that is Noctis' Punishers, and they are pretty decent. They're not too bad. They're okay in the department of just, you know, block punishing, decent damage here and there, nothing too crazy. Except for his 10 frame Punisher, it does do a lot of damage. It's just the fact that it's only +1, so you have to be careful about that. Also, because of his small jab range, he does not really, can't hit some -10 moves with pushback, so it is kind of unfortunate. In those scenarios, you'll have to run up and do a mix-up because he can't reach. But those situations are few and far between. The ones I can think of is like Walt Leo, wall standing 4-1+2. That's a little bit hard to do. With that being said, when we serve his block punishers, let's get straight into his top 15 moves. So Noctis is a pretty simple character, so I won't really have to talk too much, hopefully, and I won't have to split this into 2 videos, but I may, so we'll see. First, going off with is probably his most important tool for capitalizing on mistakes is Noctis's down forward 2 Royal Edge. Down forward 2 with Noctis, 15 frames, launch on hit, and -20 on block. So, unlike Chloe's hop kick, which is I believe 17, Noctis is -20, so it's definitely like you don't want to throw this move out if you're not really like balls sure that it's gonna hit, because this move is very risky, but it's incredibly great as long as you have the confirm. So if an opponent whiffs, down forward 2, doesn't matter what axis or whatever, unless you're on the back, because in the back you can do a special back turn thing, but even if you're side axis, down forward 2, because his conversions are very, 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 very easy. Noctis is very good at off-axis combos because his combo structure is very good at off-axis things. It doesn't have a problem with realignment because the hitboxes on his mids are actually really, really big, so it's very hard for them to mess up. But the reason why this is very good is just that it's just a tremendously powerful whiff punishment tool. It's about a range 3 move all the way from over there, and anytime opponent whiffs, as long as you're in range 3, you want to pop this, because it's just like, it's so easy. It's like a super Claudio hop kick. It does have a very consistent high crush. I'm not sure if it's a high crush, but it does have a lot of high evasive in the hurtbox because of how much it ducks forward. But the thing that does separate it from a hop knee, or a hop kick, is that while he is jumping in this animation, he only jumps at the end. So rather, this is a late low crush, and it doesn't start up low crushing. So while most low crush moves jump or are low crushing at frame 9, if Noctis does his down forward 2, it low crushes at a much later frame, maybe like, I don't know, like 15 or 14 or something like that. So it's pretty late in that department. It is more of a super down forward 2 than it is really a super hop kick, if you think about it. However, unlike some other down forward 2s in the game, this move does not have very good tracking. It tracks slightly to the left side step left, but it still doesn't really have the best tracking, so it's pretty linear, as with most of Noctis' moves. So primarily, your game plan with Noctis, amongst other things, is to try and land this on hit as much as possible without spamming it, because if you spam it, you're going to kill yourself. Noctis is very easy. I see this as a bad habit a lot with a lot of Noctis players, is that they're so trigger happy with Royal Edge as well as with Warp Strike. They're too trigger happy with these moves, and they tend to get themselves killed because they keep using it. So, if you are planning on maining Noctis, you have to be very careful about how you use down forward 2. But once you play him enough, you can get a feel for when it's a good time to use down forward 2. Also, down forward 2 has a very low hitting hitbox, so it can hit certain low stances, such as it is Relax and I believe Leo's Buck. It is not as consistent against AOP. I know for sure AOP down beats it, but I do believe I've hit it before with I've hit AOP before with down forward 2. That being said, it is more like this is your end goal for Noctis, is landing down forward 2 as much as you can. That's the end goal. Everything else I'm going to talk about is how to set up scenarios to use down forward 2. Because you don't want to be throwing this out too much. It is a top 15 move because it is the best possible reward besides hitting a down back 1+2. It is the best thing you can do to achieve more because it is high damage. But you want to be more cautious about when and how you use it. But I would say my best tip if for an aspiring Noctis player is to become comfortable with the range of down forward 2, and things that you can whiff punish with down forward 2. Become ready to whiff punish with it, but don't always blow the trigger. So, moving on, we have his down forward 1, which is negative 13 frames, negative 1 on block, and plus 7 on hit. This has a follow-up down forward 1 form, which is negative 5 on block and knockdown on hit. This is also a counter hit combo. And the move itself is pretty delayable. The second hit also tracks pretty well. I don't know if it tracks entirely, but it does track pretty decently. At least steps. I'm not sure about sidewalks. Because it is the same animation of his up forward 4, which is a homing move. So, the reason I listed his down forward 1 is because this is probably his best mid poke out of all of his other mid pokes. His down forward 1 is very, very generic, and it has a solid hitbox that goes pretty far forward, and tracks to sidestep left as well. So, with this move, you don't really, it's not explosive, but the reason why it's so good is because it calms opponents down from trying anything too crazy. This is your primary pressure tool with Noctis, is to use down forward 1 amongst other things, but down forward 1 is the thing that ties it all together because he has this really great mid check. This is pretty generic compared to all the other down forward 1s in the game. It's nothing too special other than the pretty decent hitbox, and the follow-up, which is very similar to Dragonov's down forward 4. Down forward 1-4, but also his down forward 1-4, the second hit does low crush, so if they try to low it, you can actually low crush and hopefully hit them, but if it is a high crushing low move, this will whiff because down forward 1-4 as well as up forward 4, even though they are low crushing moves, they are high hitting low crush moves, so they can whiff actually on someone who's doing a low that low crushes, like Dragonov down 2, for example. But anyways, so the reason why it's so good is, like I said, it checks opponents really, really well, and it's the fastest mid that Noctis has, and so he needs this to keep opponents in check from trying anything too crazy on him, as well as using it as a multi-purpose pressure tool to just keep checking opponents and setting up frame situations where he can use frame traps, he can sidestep, backdash, block, parry, counter hit attack, jab, whatever. He can do a lot of things after down for 1, either on block or on hit. And then this is pretty generic for most of the casts. A lot of the casts can do stuff that Noctis can do with their down forward 1, because down forward 1 is such a generic, universal tool. But the reason I'm listing it number 2 in his top 15 is because of just how generic his is. It's very, very universal, which is very good, because the universal version of down forward 1 is a good version of it. Unlike Josie's down forward 1, which is not so generic, and that one has a very, very niche use. So Josie doesn't have the fast 13 frame mid check that Noctis does. Josie has 3, which is 13 frames, but it is -7 and not the -1 that Noctis has. So for Noctis and many other characters, having a very generic down for 1 is a great thing. Also of note, you can counter hit check with this. If you do counter with down forward 1, you can use the follow-up for the 4. So you can bait, and if they don't press buttons because of the follow-up, you can start using that for mix-ups and pressure and what forth. You just have to be careful about using the high because the high is blockable and you can get launched for it very easily. This also has pretty good wall carry, so pretty decent like that. You could use that for wall carry. The second hit also screws by itself if it hits mid combo, so you can use it for that as well. That goes for every every animation of that move. So up forward 4 and forward, down forward 4, 2-4 also do the exact same thing. Also wall standing up forward 4. Also with wall splats. So pressuring, they press a button or something and they get hit by that, it does wall splat and you can get a combo after that. And it does wall break. So it's a very good multi-purpose tool. You just can't, use the follow-up too much because of course you can get blown up for it. The best thing, not the best thing, but one of the good things about it is if the follow-up is blocked, it's only -5, so you have a little bit of options there. So moving on from his down forward 1, we have his forward 1+2, and this is probably one of his best tools overall. Well, I mean, I put it in number 3 in top 15, but still. So, for forwards 1+2, it starts at 15 frames, -9 on block, and +9 on hit. I've heard some sources say that it's plus 10G, but the point is, it's super plus on hit. So, and it's a homing move that is also a counter hit launcher. Oops. Oh, I can't do combos now. There we go. So good luck. 58. That's pretty good. You can do more with that, actually. So this is probably Noctis's best answer to stepping. As I mentioned before, Noctis's tracking is no bueno. It's not very good. So to make up for his poor tracking, he has 3 really great homing moves. I'll talk about all of them individually, but his forward 1+2 is easily the best of them all. Because it is safe, it is crazy plus frames on hit, and it is a counter hit launcher, and it's really good range. It advances forward a lot. So this is probably one of Noctis's best approach tools, is just using this move because it is safe, and if they haven't pressed a button, then great, then you get a counter hit launcher. And if they just get hit by it raw, then you get a very, very free mix-up afterwards here, which is incredible, which is great for Noctis because he needs that frame advantage because a lot of his best moves are kind of slow. Pretty self-explanatory here. Block, you block, or you make a read, defensive read. Forward hit, you do a free mix-up. Counter hit, you get a launcher. In my opinion, whenever I counter with this move, I tend to just do a lot of dash jabs to make use of Noctis's really great wall carry. But that was not the only combo you could do there. So the poor thing about this move is that it has like a point-blank hitbox, so the move doesn't actually hit until the end, so you can actually be really careful about whiffing it here, because if it whiffs, very punishable. So another thing, just like down forward 2, you can use this move quite a bit because it is safe, but you want to be careful about the range with it. It does have good range, but you want to make sure that it connects, because if it whiffs, very easily whiff punished. Also, you don't want to use this move too much if your opponent is not stepping, because if your opponent's not stepping, then this is a waste of a move, in my opinion, in terms of just spamming it, hoping you'll get a hit, because it is -9, and it does leave them really close. So what you want to be careful here is that because you're so close at -9, they get their free mix-up. So you don't want to lose your turn too much with Noctis, like unnecessarily like throwing away your turn. So instead of just spamming forward 1+2, you want to do it on the check that the opponent is trying to step Noctis a lot. Also, like in a situation where, let's say after down back 2, it's +4 and it has a lot of range that pushes out a little bit, so they might try to step afterwards because of that situation. Then you can use forward 1+2 to lock them in. Use it. Of course, it's a home move, so use it against stepping, but also just use it in general to check people who are maybe like blocking low, or you can use it as an approach tool. You can use it also as one of the best uses of this move is that it's very, very, very good at keeping the opponent locked down at the wall, because it does wall splat and it does home and it's an approaching tool. So you could dash and then not do it, or you could dash and do forward 1+2. So it's a mix up in itself, and it does wall splat. So very great at keeping the opponent at the wall splats, tracking, homing obviously, mid, 15 frames, very fast. Counter hit launcher, this move is crazy good, and it's even safe. But don't overuse it, or else you're just going to end up eating a lot of mix-ups, so be careful. If someone is stepping Noctis a lot, because that is one of his weaknesses, this is probably your first choice to stop them from stepping. So next we've got Sidestep 2, which is another one of his best mid pokes. It's an 18 frame move that's 0 on block, +5 on hit, forces crouch, I believe? Yeah, it forces crouch on hit, and on counter hit it knocks down for a guaranteed down back +2, which does, I believe, 40 damage total? 45 damage total. I don't think you get a wall splat, though. Yeah, it doesn't wall splat, I didn't think so. But anyways, so the reason why this is super good is that this move is very good for forcing an opponent to either respect you, or like what you calls it, or you make a read on them. For example, if you do sidestep 2 and it's blocked, it's 0. So either the opponent is going to try to press a button, or they're afraid that you'll do something, and then they will be defensive. So in this situation, it's ambiguous. But since you know that you are going to put yourself willingly into a zero on block situation, then you can create different different movements out of this. So I could do sidestep 2 block. Let me just make him block for a second. Sidestep 2 block, sidestep that way, sidestep 2 block, slide walk this way, sidestep 2 block, jab, sidestep 2 block, parry, sidestep 2 block, crouch, sidestep 2 block, throw, sidestep 2 block, pause, and then Demo Man or Emo Man, whatever. So your choices after sidestep 2 block are very, very, very good. So it depends on whether the opponent responds accordingly in time. So this is a very read-based situation. It's like, well, if you sidestep 2, they jab, you sidestep, and you down forward 2, are you going to do it again, and they're going to do a homing move, or are you going to, like, not do it again? So it's very ambiguous. It's a great way to set up mix-ups and forcing opponents to make mistakes. But, of course, this is not, like, plus frames. So the thing about it that's interesting is that since it's 0, it is ambiguous. So it's either acts like a plus frame move because the opponent's afraid of what you might do, since it is like a move where they know you can move afterwards, or they don't know and it just looks plus. Or you could block and see what they do, and you could take advantage of that. So it's very, very great for creating neutrals, or neutral game and situations that are gonna be in your favor. Granted, you get the right read. The reason why I say you'll get the right read most of the time is because you're willingly doing it to yourself, so you have an idea of what the opponent might do afterwards. And while the opponent doesn't know that you're going to do sidestep 2, unless you've been doing it predictably. But in the scenario that you've been doing it at a timing they can't find, then they're going to be like, oh no, 0 on block, I don't know, jab, and then you sidestep launch them. Or, oh, 0 on block, I'm just going to block, and then free mix up. So, you know, it's a scenario, or like sidestep block. It's like, oh, he's probably gonna step homing move, and then it's like -9, and then you get a free mix up afterwards. So you can take advantage of opponents' reactions or responses immediately after sidestep 2. If they don't do anything, you get a mix up, unless their timing is slow. But you got to be aware of that. And if they press something, you have to be one step ahead of them and know what they're gonna press, or what's their most likely press. Sidestep 2, great in general. And if it hits, then you get a free mix up. Simple as that. +5, full crouch, you get a free mix up. Also, if it counter hits, you get that free knockdown, and you get to do down back 1+2 for a free 45 damage. So this move in general is really great. The tracking on it is decent. Doesn't track walks very well, but the thing that makes it hard to step is because it comes out of a sidestep move. So generally when you do a sidestep or a dash, it tends to realign, so it becomes harder to step because if you realign, then you have to step the step. So that makes it a lot harder to dodge a move because there's a realignment during your step. So you have to step again. So it makes it awkward. So stepping this move is weird. So it can happen, but so you ask yourself, when should you use the move? Anytime really in your neutral. I mean, it's good anywhere on the screen, at the wall, mid-screen, you know. It also hits grounded. Actually, weird scenario, it doesn't hit grounded super, like, all the time, but it hits ground most of the time. So let me see if I can show this, like. So it hit the ground there, but if I'm really close to him here, it's not gonna hit. So it seems to hit legs more consistently than hit, like, his chest, or like on the side. But there are weird scenarios where it will not hit. So you have to be careful about that a little bit. Just to be aware that it is possible. So that's sidestep for you. You can use that in conjunction with a lot of other things. You know, you could do it like that, or, you know, high crush, or emo man, or, you know, throw, or, like I said, so many things, so many options afterwards. You can even do nothing. You just backdash and see what they do. Forward sidestep 2 in general is also really great for testing opponents' reactions to things. See how well they know Noctis. So forward 2 was the next move in the run talked about, and this is the legendary Warp Strike. This is the thing that everybody was like, whoa, Noctis is crazy, when they first saw Noctis, because of the legendary Warp Strike. And the Warp Strike is a move that is about here? Yeah, I think that's the max range, maybe a little bit further. It goes pretty much the whole screen. It's not the whole screen, but a good amount of the screen. I-20 knocks down on hit into a hard knockdown where you cannot tech roll or back roll out of it, and it is -9 on block. Special mid, so you can block it standing or crouching. The good thing to note is that when Warp Strike hits, it turns the opponent always front-facing axis. So let's say I do this combo. He's backwards, right? So let me do Warp Strike, and now he's facing forward. You can do this at the wall to help realign Oki and to get rid of awkward situations and combos. It happens pretty much anytime, so I could do like that, and then Warp Strike again, and then boom, he's fixed. So that's probably one of the most unique properties about Noctis combo is that he can always fix axis. Noctis does not give two craps about weird axis combos because his mid hitboxes and the properties of them are so safe for having combos juggled properly. Anyway, so Warp Strike is the primary uses of Warp Strike is to hit opponents whenever they whiff from really far away. So if you're playing against Noctis, one of the first things you'll learn to do against Noctis is never ever whiff anywhere, pretty much, because he can hit you all the way, not there, but a little bit further than that. So for whatever reason you press something from far away, you can get whiff punished for it. So be very, very, very cautious about how you whiff or why you decide to whiff from so far away, and especially if someone is running it. So forward 2, the thing about forward 2 that makes it not super OP, because if you think about it, it's like, well, I'm just gonna backdash and forward 2 every time I see him not blocking or pressing a button or whatever. Well, that sounds great, but I mean, the thing is that, like, it is an I-20 move, so it is really kind of slow, and you don't have the reactions of Bruce Lee, and you can't like react to everything. You could train yourself really hard, but you're not going to be able to whiff punish everything with Warp Strike. And so with that being said, if you're like this close and you try to whiff punish with Warp Strike, that's probably a bad idea because of just how slow it is and because he extends his hitbox forward. So you don't want to do that because you can get blown up for just trying to Warp Strike at really close range. What you should be using it for is trying to hit opponents who are, for whatever reason, you know they are not in a blocking state from far away. However, like I was saying earlier, one of the worst habits with Noctis players I have seen, including myself, sometimes I'm trying to get rid of it, is just randomly Warp Striking anytime you're at like range 4. Now, it's obvious that at this range, Noctis has a lot of good range moves, but the only thing that's going to hit with this range is Warp Strike. So, obviously, I'm going to Warp Strike. And if I Warp Strike, it's very steppable. This is one of the most linear moves in the game. It's easier to step it left, but in general, the move is extremely linear. And the way it recovers, let me show blocking. You do forward 2, and you do a forward roll. This forward roll is safe, so if you hold back, you will block, and it's -9. However, because it's -9, you completely lose your turn, and it leaves you point blank with the opponent, which means free range 0 -9 mix-up. Basically, you just gave opponent free +9. So you want to be really careful about when you use Warp Strike. This is going to be a theme with Noctis a lot, is that you have to be very careful and conscious of your move choices. So like, yes, maybe you saw the opponent twitch at all the way over here, but you don't want to throw out Warp Strike, maybe, because if you do, and it, let's say it's blocked, well, now you just put yourself into a mix-up. Or they sidestepped, well, now you can get launched. It is a little bit hard to whiff punish Warp Strike because of the access that it leads you, because if, like me, go all the way here, my backdash is kind of slow tonight. If I whiff it, he's going to roll forward. If you use Warp Strike at point blank and you sidestepped it, it's a lot harder to whiff punish because he rolls past you. However, if you do it at max-ish range, and then they sidestep it, then you end up in front of them rolling, and then it's a free launch. So, you have to be very careful about when you use Warp Strike. But let's talk about we've talked about what it can do for you, like it's on hit, and how it can be very, very unsafe for you to use Warp Strike. But one of the best reasons why this move is one of Noctis' best tools, other than the fact that it's the farthest range whiff punisher in the game, is that it does a good down damage and it leaves a very, very good Oki situation for Noctis afterwards. Since I'm talking about Warp Strike, I'll talk about Noctis' Oki here for a second. I'm going to have a dedicated video to talking about Noctis' Okizeme, but I'll briefly introduce it here just to get people started. So after Warp Strike, it leaves the opponent hard knockdown. They can't tech roll and they cannot back roll. So this is a forced hard knockdown state where their wake up options are limited to back, up, side roll, and get up attacks. So, or forward roll, I guess if you want to be crazy, or stay down. So in that situation, it leaves them at the perfect range where all of Noctis's long range attacks will hit, while also not being too close so that he can get counter hit out of them. So if I do this and opponent's down, this is a 50-50 where I can do down back 2, which of course is blocks, which is 50-50, which does about 23, and on grounded it would probably do 19. So that's 33 plus 19. So that's about 50-ish damage, about 50, every time that you get hit on the floor with Warp Strike, which is a lot. So you could lose a lot of health for guessing wrong on a Warp Strike. However, if you get Warp Strike and you block low because of down back 2, because it is a launch punishable low, and then you can do down back 1+2, which results in a launcher, which is 70 damage on top of 70 damage minimum on top of 33 on top of wall carry into the wall. So the reward can be massive after Warp Strike. It's a great mix-up. And opponents' wake-up options are limited because both down back 2 and down back 1+2 will beat every single get-up attack. They'll just get counter hit. And if the opponent tries a side roll, Noctis has some decent side roll catches with sidestep and dash up down back 2, as well as dash up down back 1+2, and even charge down back 1+2, or even down back 1+2, which can float randomly on a side rolls as well. So Warp Strike, amazing Oki after Warp Strike. Or you can run up and do like down forward 1, you know, or you can do while running 1+2 afterwards, which is a lot of I'll introduce the move later. And it's just really, really, really great situation for you. Very advantageous for Noctis whenever he lands a Warp Strike. So you can see that the move is more than just a really strong whip finisher. It puts Noctis in probably one of his best advantageous positions. The down back 2 and the down back 1+2, depending on your opponent, can be risky because especially down back 2 is launch punishable, so be careful with it. But the fact that it is launch punishable and slightly reactable means that the opponent will want to block it because they want to block that launch punishable low. They want to get the reward out of it. So it makes the mix-up even trickier because you have the opponent's desire to block a launch punishable move, and now you can just launch them with your strongest launcher, which also hits grounded, by the way. So that's really, really great. So it's a great position for Noctis in general. Unfortunately, despite what it looks like, Warp Strike does not wall splat, nor does it wall break. The Rage Drive version, since we're talking about Warp Strike, I'll talk about his Rage Drive. His Rage Drive is forward 2+3, which does send them very far back. It is very similar to Fang's Rage Drive, Leo's, Nina's, Paul's, where it does this really far pushback, and it is plus on block at the wall. I believe it's probably like plus 13 or something like that. And this one does wall splat instead. This is actually one of my favorite where it does because he just fucking impales them with the great sword, which is crazy. And you get followed. You have to be careful about the Rage Drive sometimes because when it does wall splat, it can leave the opponent weird access to the wall, so you can't do like Demo Man as a wall, and you have to be careful about your wall positioning. And it does wall splat from very far away, and if it hits mid-screen, you do get a running mix-up. So this turns into like just you know, a wake-up running, forced running mix-up, and then they don't have to wake up, so it depends on, you know, what the opponent's thinking. So it turns into like a guessing scenario, basically. If you have it blocked, I believe it's about +2 or so mid-screen, but I would use the Rage Drive more from farther away so you can leave some space between you and the opponent, because it tends not to be too consistent on its frame data when it hits mid-screen, when it's blocked mid-screen, so you have to be a little bit apprehensive about how you use it. But it does wall splat from like pretty much like super far away, so I mean, like if I just, let's say I hit him over here. Probably about here. Yeah, it's gonna, oh wow, probably one more dash forward and then would have wall splatted, so very good for that scenario. Great for wall pressure as well because it leaves you so much less frames. If you know how to use Leo's or Paul's Rage Drive, it's the same concept. His Rage Drive also does not have any better tracking, so it is the exact same properties as Warp Strike, except that instead of knocking them down, it pushes them really far back. And if they block it, it's plus frames either mid-screen or at the wall. Especially at the wall, it's mad plus frames. Also does more damage. So moving on, we have his low pokes, down 3 and down back 4. These moves are very similar, so I'm going to talk about them at the same time. So down 3 slash down back 3, but down 3 and down back 3, there's the same move, is a 16 frame high crush low that has a very low profile, so sometimes it makes mids whiff, sometimes, depends on the mid, and it leaves -2 and pushes the opponent out and leaves Noctis in full crouch. On counter hit, on hit, it's both -2, and on block, it's -15. So this is Noctis's probably his primary low poke to use from standing, because that is the best range. Also pretty unseeable, pretty fast, high crush, so you can go into a full crouch mix-up here. So the situation after his down 3 is pretty ambiguous. Like I said with earlier things with Noctis, because he's on negative frames, or, you know, like, also not very plus, it tends to invite the opponent to press buttons more, so you can sort of, like, bait the opponent into attacking and capitalize on mistakes. So you can do down back 3, and then the opponent's like, oh, well, you know, he's -2, I'm gonna hit down forward. I'm gonna use down forward 1, because I'm gonna check him so he doesn't press buttons afterwards. And then so you sidestep, and then you launch him, or you backdash, and you launch him, or you parry, or whatever, you know. So you can read the opponent's tendency to press buttons on your negative frames. Also, down back 3 face out pretty far, so even though you're negative frames, you tend to, like, not even be really that bad because of just how far away you are, so you can actually use this to your advantage and, you know, use a wall standing forward to interrupt a dash in, or a wall standing 1-2, or a full crouch down 4-2. So this leads into his full crouch mix-up, which is probably one of the most important things that he has. And since this is the main tutorial, I guess I will talk about it. I'll talk about it when I get to full crouch down 4-2. Yeah, that sounds about right, because this is probably mostly about the low pucks now. We're talking about after top 15 years. But the basic introduction to his full crouch mix-up is that he either has full crouch down 4-2 or a 4-3. That's the basic gist to it, is that either he launches you, or he hits you with that low, it tracks really well, up to the opponent. So anyways, besides, down back 3, it tracks really well, both sides, high crush, -2, you can sort of, like, contest, not really. You'll get beat by frame data, but you can bait attacks because of weak frame data. So be wary of that. Also, note you can do a forward 1 from crouch. So this move can be used to stop people who are coming in. Sometimes, depending on the opponent's move press. That's counter launcher, by the way. Talk about that in a moment. And so the reason why I use that is for that. But it does space out pretty far, so you have to be careful about using it. And using it at max range is okay, but you have to be careful once again just not to whiff it. And it does leave you in full crouch, so you are limited to full crouch moves right away. So just be a little bit careful about that, especially since also you can't sidestep to the foreground. And then additionally with down 3, he has down back 4. And initially I thought this move was kind of like whack, because it's like, why would you use this move? Because it's just like, it's the same exact move except it's slower. And it's the same on block and it's the same on hit. So why don't you use down back 3 because of high crushes and leaves him full crouch? Well, that's exactly the reason why you don't use down back 3 over down back 4 sometimes, is because down back 4, I think the animation is harder to recognize, because down back 3 is very obvious, because the whole thing is like, the only thing that looks like that is down back 3. Down back 4, however, doesn't look like anything else that he has. It's very unique to itself, and because he's standing, it kind of has a misleading animation with other moves. If you use down back 3 a lot and then start using down back 4, it tends to not get blocked as much because it throws off opponents' animation recognition. Throws off their senses. Is like, well, now he's doing another low, and I haven't really trained myself to see that one yet. Even though both are technically unreactable, there is that, like, twitch reaction that you have when you see a low that you recognize. And if you change what low you do, especially down back 4 and down back 3, you can kind of make him harder to hit, harder to block slightly. Harder to see, rather. But back to down back 4. The reason why you would use down back 4 over down back 3 is because it leaves him standing. So with this scenario, you can do a lot of other moves. So you can do down forward 1, you could do sidestep into foreground, you could do up forward. Well, you could do up forward from that anyways, but you could also do, you could do forward strike if you wanted, you could do down forward +2, you could do down back 1 +2, you could do like anything you want after down back 4. You could backdash more, you could sidewalk, you could, like the options from down back 4, there are so many of them. It's just the important part is that it leaves him standing, and that the animation is different, so it's a little bit harder to recognize than down back 3. But also this move tracks also pretty well, and the range is not too bad either. I tend to use this move as the round ender instead of down back 3 because down back 3 is more predictable. So there are a lot of times where I'll dash an opponent's face and then I'll just do down back 4 because it's just harder to recognize. It's hard to tell what he's doing over down back 3. Also it hits really low, but I made it to low, so what did you expect? I think this hits grounded as well, but so does this. Also, down back 4 doesn't push as far out as down back 3 does. Down back 3 tends to push them farther out like that, but if I hit him down back 4, it doesn't really move them that much, so you can kind of use this a little bit more for offensive poking than down back 3 is. But the thing is, like I said, his lows are mediocre, but these are his 2 primary fast low pokes to get opponents antsy and just to take some chip damage here and there. But speaking of his low pokes, we're gonna get into his most dangerous one, which is down back to the low spear. I call this one the land.